We're going to talk about, we're going to fast forward that story to a point where we see David actually moving past his anointing and into his time of appointment. Because if you stuck with her in that time, you knew that yes, he was anointed in that space and in that period, but just because you're anointed in one time frame does not mean it's time for you to actually get out and move in your appointment. So today we're talking about being appointed and more specifically how to defeat your giants. Anybody in this room today have any giants in your life? Anything that's just huge, that's in your way, and you feel like it's a hard battle to fight, and you don't know if you can do it on your own? It is a giant to you. Yesterday, I was looking on the news, and I saw a young lady by the name of Brittany Newsom who was scaling a pole in Charleston, South Carolina. And she climbed up to the pole, and what that image said to me was that she was in charge of taking a hold of her fight for her giants. Some of us have giants that look like racism, sexism, or any kind of ageisms. But Brittany, and what she did was said, I am going to fight this giant no matter how large it may seem to me. I am committed to the fight. Some of us have a fight in this room today that we need to be committed to. Defeating giants is an act of winning something that most people don't think you can win. So when we talk about giants, we're talking about something that's not small, something that does not seem like you're able to defeat. It's those battles that leave your jaws dropped and other people's heads shaking in disbelief. I can't believe you're facing that giant. Giants are the obstacles that seem insurmountable. It's when you win your battle with cancer. It's when the Supreme Court lifts up love over the beliefs of individuals. It's when your hard-headed children actually listen to those lessons you've been trying to impart. Or when you finally don't have to deal with people in your life who disrespect and devalue you. Giants have faces too, family. But defeating giants always reminds us that our fight is worth it. So the story of David and Goliath is a great example of how God's story became David's story and how God's power enabled an unlikely warrior to defeat an overwhelming giant. Now, before we even get to this battle, we have to understand who David was, and we have to understand the story behind who David is. And so if we can rewind a couple weeks and we go back to Reverend CJ's sermon, and where she talked about the very end of her sermon, she said that Samuel came and he looked at Jesse and he said, go get your sons. Bring all of your sons because God is calling me to anoint one of your sons. So Jesse went and got his sons. He got the older sons, brought them out. And the king said, are these all of your sons? Because I'm not hearing from God that this is the one that I'm supposed to be anointing. And Jesse said, well, I got Daniel in the field. But he's the youngest. He's a shepherd. Samuel said, well, I asked you to bring all of your sons. So can you go get David for me? Because I'm just trying to be obedient to what God is telling me to do right now. So he went and got David. And as soon as David walked in, he said, this is the one that should be anointed. So now David is anointed. Now, but we also know, and how I opened this up was that just because David was anointed doesn't mean it was time for him to go into his appointment of kingship. He went back in the fields to be a shepherd and doing what God had called him to do in that season. Now, if we continue to walk along the story of David, we see now in verse 7, in chapter 17, that Jesse looks at David and says, hey, man, there's a fight going on the battlefield, and it's this dude named Goliath. He is literally a giant. Goliath was, by historical text, 9 feet tall. So if you know anybody close to 9 feet tall, that is certainly a giant. So this giant is standing up in front of this crowd, and he's saying, if anybody wants to come and defeat me, then I dare you to step now. If you win, my people will bow to you. So now people are starting to shake. They don't know who's going to go fight this giant. Everybody's looking around. David's brothers are on the sideline at this time. And David's father says, hey, go check on your brothers and make sure they're good. So David, being obedient to his father, all he does, remember, David knows he's anointed. All he does is take some bread and some water. He goes to check on his brothers. He does what he's supposed to do, all in the back of his head, knowing, hey, I'm anointed. So even though I'm on an assignment just to bring some bread and water, if the opportunity presents itself, I might step into my time of appointment. So he's walking with his bread and his water. He's giving his brothers what they need. He's checking on them. Y'all good? Yeah, we good, man. So then he turns to Saul and says, so what's this about? So who's this? Who is this? This is the giant that everybody's talking about? Okay, so that's the giant. Okay, so what are we doing about the giant? Remember, he remembers that he's anointed. So he's like, this might be my opportunity to step into my time of appointment. So now we find the text in verse 32. This is the conversation that David has with King Saul. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. This young dude, David, looking up at a 9-foot tall giant, is telling the king, look, man, I got this. And he told him, do not lose heart, because I'm going to handle this. But look what Saul said. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. How many people have those people in your life that try to tell you what you cannot do? They look at what you're about to do, and they say, no, you can't do that. They've been doing this their whole life. You can't compete with them. They've been running that business their whole life. You can't run this. They've been running that their whole life. You're not equipped. But David remembered his anointing. So David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. He basically said, you don't know me, man. You don't know my story. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know my preparation. You don't know what has prepared me for this moment to face this giant. He said, when a lion or a bear came and carried off the sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. So he's not only talking trash, he's talking trash on God's behalf. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. So he said, this ain't nothing new. I've been down this road before. It might have been a bear and a lion before, but today it's about to be Goliath. So he went on to say, Saul said to David, go, look at Saul's response, go and the Lord be with you. So he's like, all right, man, I didn't expect all that coming out of you. So if you feel all that, then go ahead and give it a shot. You know, that's one less person I got to worry about. So then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. Now, y'all know that's a mistake right there. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He tried to put on his clothes on somebody else. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. You know, he said, this is going to look good, man. This is what I know works for battles. This always works. It looks great. It's quality material. But David fastened on his sword over the tunic, and then he tried to walk. But because he wasn't used to them, he wasn't used to wearing somebody else's clothes. He wasn't used to putting on somebody else's armor. He said, you know, I can't go in these because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. He said, I will use the tools that I know how to use to fight the battle that God called me to fight. I don't need your helmet. I don't need your tunic. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. So not only am I going to kill you, I'm going to embarrass you. Because you've not only come against me and my people, but worst case, you've come against my God. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds. David talking trash, y'all. And the wild animals. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered there will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. And he will give all of you into our hands. How to defeat a giant. The first thing we see in this text is that David encourages us that we have to stay encouraged. In verse 32, David said, "Let no one lose heart." That means if you're going to go out into the battlefield, the first step to defeating anything is first believing that you have what it takes. You know, it's a good thing to receive encouragement from other people. That's great. That's wonderful. But sometimes you're going to have to encourage yourself. Because everybody's not going to be present when you need them to be present. Everybody doesn't know what you're going through when you're going through it. It's not that they love you any less or they don't care about your struggle. It's that only you know exactly what you're facing and what your giant looks like. So if you have to wake up every morning and give yourself some daily affirmations and say, hey, I'm a child of God. I know that if God said it, it will be done. I know that I have the victory if I stand on his word. I know that if God put me in this situation, he's going to protect and cover me. I know that I have what it takes to defeat whatever giants are in front of me today. It starts with how we think. If we can get our mind in the right position, then we can go into battle with the right mindset. That's what being encouraged is all about. So there's a poem that I often use, and I used to use it sometimes when I taught, and the poem is called Thinking. It's by Walter Wintle. And it says, if you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but think you can't, it's almost certain that you won't. If you think you'll lose, you've lost. For out in the world we find success begins with the fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Because life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or later the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. It starts with how we think. We have to encourage ourselves. Wake up every day as if you're going to defeat whatever tries to kill what God has inside of you. I know when I wake up every morning, the first thing I do, because I tend to wake up with a little bit of stress, with a little thinking about what I have to do that day, what meetings I have to be at, when I have to be on time somewhere, I have to center myself and encourage myself with a daily devotion. Do a little reading. Maybe I need to get into some worship and do some singing and some praying. Whatever it is, find your space of encouragement. Because if you are planning to defeat any kind of giant, you got to get your mind right. We also see in this text that you have to be bold. After encouragement, you then have to be bold enough to go out and face your giant. Because you will never win a war if you're too afraid to even face your battles. You say, yeah, I would be good, I would be good at that if I would just ... Man, if it was me doing that, I would... Man, I know if I could just get up and go, if I had the resources to do... And we have all these what ifs, and if I could just do this, and maybe if this, and we have these regrets, but we'll never be able to fight our giants if we don't get up and do it. You got to be bold. David did not sit on the sidelines stammering and stuttering about what he thinks God called him to do. Either God called you to do it or he did not. David said, I am called to fight this giant. I remember 3 years ago when I was anointed. Some of us have to go back in time to remember a promise that God might have made in our lives. Because believe it or not, God is just not a promise maker. God is a promise keeper. So if God said it 3 years ago, that means I still have what it takes to defeat my giant on today. So boldness, though, does not only include just bucking up on somebody. Being bold also includes being humble. Humility is an excellent part of boldness. Although David was a warrior and he had a warrior mentality, he still referred to himself as a servant. So he acknowledged that, yes, I am a servant of God. I'm doing all this. I'm getting crunk on y'all for a reason. I'm a vessel of God. And I'm still a part of the king's court. So life's battles are best fought understanding that we are connected to God. We are vessels. We are actually nothing without God. So we can find comfort and joy in our tools and our equipment, but at the end of the day, we don't have any power if we're not connected to God. And so being bold also means we have to be able to stand up against people who don't see what we see in ourselves. Because Saul tried to discourage David. People try to tell us who we are and who or what we're against. But nobody can size up your opponent better than you can. Because, nobody knows your preparation. You can look at somebody else's giant and say, wow, you going to be able to do that? You got a lot on your plate. Are you sure that you can? Are you sure God has anointed you for that? But they don't know that you were out killing lions and bears. They don't know all that you've done. I remember I got into a fight when I was in grade school in my neighborhood, and I was up against this bully. And he was a bigger dude, and my so-called friends was trying to clown me on the sidelines like, man, Stephen, I don't think you can take him. I don't think you're going to make it through this one. We're going to go ahead and call this an L, and we're going to keep it moving. But they did not know that on every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30, I was in karate class. So they didn't know my preparation. So when it came down for the battle, I threw a couple roundhouses on them, and I won one battle. I mean, although I lost the entire fight, that's not the point today, but the point is you can even celebrate in the battles that you do win. Because believe this, it might have happened that I lost that entire fight that day, but 3 weeks later, if somebody else come up to me, I've learned from the mistakes I made in that first fight, and you're not going to get me the second time. So I might have lost that battle in that moment, but I'm going to win this war because I'm learning and I'm growing along the way. That is what preparation and boldness entails. And when that does happen, that boldness will shut people up. They will look at you like, wow, I did not expect that to come out of you. I didn't see that coming from my mouth. But that's not even for them to understand. Because it's not them on the battlefield. You worry about your giant, I'm going to worry about mine. So the third thing we see in this text is we have to trust our preparation. David let Saul know he was prepared for the battle. How was he prepared? David was a shepherd. So being a shepherd means you have a certain skill set that you learn in shepherding. Being a shepherd means you know how to lead. That means when you're out on the field and you have sheep following you, if you say go over here, they will go over here. If you say move in this direction, they will move in this direction. So they're prepared, or you are prepared to lead based on the fact that you have led sheep. So what does that mean? What that really means is that every step along the way has some significance. Because if David was able to lead sheep, then by the time he finished killing Goliath and eventually led the army of God, now he knows how to lead people because he's been spending all this time over here leading sheep. Now, President Obama, regardless of how you feel about him or the politics connected to him, is a successful president. President Obama tried to be the best he was in every season. He didn't look back early on in his life and say, you know what, I'm going to be a great president. He said, no, in this season, I'm going to be a great community organizer. In this season, I'm going to be a great senator, so that now in this season, I can be in my second term of my presidency. It's all about making sure that we pay attention to every step and every season along the way, so that when we do get in front of injustices and we get in front of our giants, we are now confident that we're prepared to fight. Because giants are not defeated overnight. Each step along the way is valuable. Something else that David learned while he was a shepherd is that he learned how to be in solitude. When you're a shepherd, you're by yourself. There's no people around you co-shepherding with you. It's you and the sheep. So David's preparation required solitude. That means he was away from the influencers of seeing defeat and discouragement. So the daily comparisons, he didn't have none of that. Waiting for people's approval, he didn't have to deal with that. It was when it's time to go, sheep. We're going over here. Okay, we're going over here, sheep. So basically what this tells me is that David was able to do his job without leaning on the opinions of other people. So his solitude had some significance. Because if he was able to learn this while he was shepherding sheep, then when Saul said, I don't think you can do this, David's response is, well, I'm not really used to listening to other people when I do my job. This is new to me. I don't really need you to tell me what you think I can do or not. I'm used to being by myself when I lead. So, I mean, that's great. Thank you for your input, but I'm going to keep doing what I know God has called me to do. So solitude may not only mean physical solitude, but it could include for us a season of solitude where we aren't bothered by people and their opinions. Because, people will try to come up to you with their opinions and they'll mask it with the word of the Lord. Say, well, God told me that I don't think you can do that. Oh, my God. That's not my God. I don't feel any conviction. We're not on the same page with that. So I don't know if that's the same God that we're serving here. So sometimes it would benefit us if we're trying to face our giants to say, you know what, this is my season of solitude. If you have something that you think God is sharing with you, just write it on a piece of paper, and 3 years later I'll get back to you, and then we'll talk about that. But right now I'm in my season of solitude, because when it's time for me to face my giant, all I need to focus on is what God has called me to do. So he also learned in his shepherding is that, people don't expect much from shepherds. In fact, historically, shepherds were the ones who were either too old to be productive in society or too young to be married and to build families and to do work. So David was actually an outcast of society. He was sent off in the fields as a young boy, kind of forgotten about, and they just said, hey, just watch the sheep. I mean, yeah, we need the sheep, but we just need somebody to watch them. Can you just go watch the sheep? And so what that cultivated in David was he didn't really need people to have high expectations of him. So he was able to operate out of the underdog mentality. Basically, like, it's okay for you to sleep on me. Like, that's fine. Like, yeah, you don't get me. You don't understand me. You don't understand what God has put inside of me. That's cool. I'm the underdog, because when you have no expectations for me, I have only one direction to go, and that's up. So for David, he probably reveled in the fact that, hey, I don't need your approval. Like, I don't need you to have any expectations for me. Y'all seen that little girl on the stage that was, like, doing some ballet? And it was the Aretha Franklin, R-E-S-P-C-T. That little girl did not care about anybody in that room. She didn't care about her parents getting embarrassed. She didn't care about her teacher after she got off stage, what she might say. She didn't even care about them little girls that was dancing on the stage with her. She said, you know what? I know how to dance. And I love me some Aretha Franklin, so I'm going to show y'all what it looks like to be gifted in my space. And she did what she did, regardless of what other people cared. Being a shepherd means you also know how to kill and fight. David practiced killing bears and lions. And like I said earlier, you have to take your test seriously. Remember, these are tests. So David did not say, okay, when he was faced with the bear, oh, this is going to be good for me when I face Goliath in a couple years. No, David, all he said was, I just need to face this bear today. My only focus is this bear today. I am only focused on defeating this bear today. Because if I don't defeat this bear today, I might not live till tomorrow to see this lion. But another thing that it teaches me is that once you get in front of a bear and you defeat a bear, that means you now have the tools to defeat a bear. So that's step one. Once he defeats the bear, then the lion comes along. And he's like, okay, well, I know how to defeat a bear. I've learned those tools. Now I have the tools and the equipment to defeat a lion. So now after I defeat a lion, I'm good. I know how to defeat a lion. Then we move to Goliath, the giant. And when he defeats the giant, he says, okay, wow. So what I'm learning about God and God's personality is that he will never put a giant in front of me if I'm not equipped to fight the giant. Because I made it from the bear to the lion to Goliath. And God equipped me for each step along the way. So if I feel like I'm not equipped and I know I have a giant in front of me, what I need to know is that I have everything it takes to defeat the giant that I'm staring in right now. So the bigger the giant, the greater God has prepared in you. And even still, you can learn that you can fight with the bare minimum. Like David had a stick, some stones, and a sling. So giants don't really require a whole lot of fanfare. You don't need a whole bunch of tools and trinkets. All you really need is to lean on the power of God. David was bigger than his battle because he was connected to God. We are bigger than our giant. Our giant may seem huge and insurmountable to us, but we are actually bigger than our giant because we're connected to an even bigger God. So as we're connected to a bigger God, we can face our giant and say, hey, I know you have the appearance of a giant, but I need you to know that I serve an even greater giant. My God is bigger than any giant in this entire world. And so I also see that we have to maintain our identity. Saul thought that he was helping David by dressing him in the battle clothes that he was used to. David tried to operate as a mini Saul for a couple minutes. He's like, you know what? All right, let me try this. I'm going to put on Saul's armor, and I'm going to try to fight this giant with somebody else's stuff on me. And so what does it feel like when you have somebody else's stuff on you? So now you're walking around, you talking about you trying to fight a giant, and you got somebody else's armor on you when God gave you enough armor to fight your giant. You wearing somebody else's armor that God gave them to fight their giant, trying to fight your giant. So you're walking slow, you're heavier than you should be, and you're not as effective as you could be in fighting your giant. So some of us right now are having a difficult time fighting our giant because we're not wearing our own armor. We're weighted down when we aren't operating in our own armor. It drains us to be other people. God anointed David, not Saul or his armor. So we have to be confident in what God put inside of you. God put inside of you. There's something in you that is there so that you can defeat your giant. You don't need anybody else's tools. Comparison is the greatest enemy to battling giants. We can look at somebody else's stuff and their giant. We can say, you know what? That looks just like my giant. And I see that you did this, and this to fight that giant. So if I do the same thing, then maybe I can fight my giant the same way. But what we need to realize is that just because somebody else's giant looks like our giant, it is not our giant. Just because God gave them the tools to fight their giant, it is not the giant that we're facing right now. If we mimic other people and try to fight the giants in our life, we will simply come up short. God prepares us for our own giants. Our greatest asset to this world is our own identity. God created you to be you, to fight your battles and to fight your giants. If he did not create you to be yourself, he would not have created you. Why do we need two of the same person? So being confident and maintaining your identity is very important than fighting giants. We also have to know that we have to lean on God's power. Because this giant stuff, we're not going to do it, I don't care how equipped we are, without God's power. We have to let the enemy know that we mean business. And we mean business because we are offended that someone or something would even try to minimize the name of God. We have to be protective of our God and the work our God has set out to do on this earth. So here's the thing. When we fight in the name of ourselves, we struggle and we lose. But when we fight on behalf of God and God's purpose, there is not a giant in this world that can stand up to us. You remember back in grade school when you would have the teacher assign little Sally to be in front of the class and be like, hey, Sally, I need you to take down some names. If anybody get out their seat or they start talking, I want you to take their names on the board, and I'm going to deal with them when I get back. Now, if Sally's standing in front of the classroom and the class does not know that the teacher told her that, she can say, y'all need to sit down. I need everybody to put their hands down. And the class is looking like, Sally, you sit down. Like, fall back, Sally. Who are you, Sally? She has no power or authority. But if they watch and they see that the teacher empowered her 5 minutes earlier, then now they don't just see Sally, but they see after-school detention. They see a phone call home to mama. They see a butt whooping when they get to the house. They see no video games for 3 weeks. So now you don't just see Sally, you see the power connected to Sally. So when we fight our giants, we need to be connected to the power of God, or else our giants going to look at us like, who are you? Who do you think you are? But now that we're connected to the power source, it don't matter who you think I am. It don't matter who you think I am. All that matters is that you know that I'm connected to who can defeat you. So we have to give the battles that uplift God to God and know that he will fight them. Not the battles that we create for ourselves. Because, we come up with some battles and be like, I give it to you, God. Be in the shower singing Yolanda Adams, like, not my battle, but yours. And God talking about, that is not my battle. That has nothing to do with my glorification. So get out that shower and turn the right battles over to me. But you know what? We serve a gracious and a merciful God that even when we do try to turn those battles that we created for ourselves, he'll still step in and try to give us a hand and say, hey, I need you to learn this lesson. This ain't my battle, but I'm going to help you out because you're my child and I love you, right? So David understood that the only way this giant would be defeated was if he gave the whole battle over to God. So as I close, my question today is, what battles are you trying to fight on your strength? What battles are you trying to fight on your own strength today? What giants do you need to dedicate to God? Because some of us are struggling right now, and we don't have to be struggling. So let's do a self-assessment today and in the days to come. What do you need to turn over to God? And how can we make sure that God gets the glory even when we fight the battles that God has sent us on?